You're right. Money is not going to make you happier. Money is not going to make you a better person. Money is not going to make you a good person. However, if you don't have money and if you don't understand money, well, that lack of money can impact your mental health. It can make you stressed, anxious, depressed. It is one of the leading causes of divorce. If you don't have money, you can start eating bad. You can't afford healthier food. You can't have the right gym membership. You don't have time to take care of your family. If you don't have money, you can't buy your spouse a nice vacation that they keep asking about. You can't take care of your kids the way that you might have wanted to. You can't give your kids the vacations. You can't give your kids the opportunities that maybe you want. Maybe you can't even buy the healthcare that you want, because the reality, and this is, unfortunate or fortunate, the reality of the way the system is money talks. And if you don't understand money, then you're going to be at the mercy of people who have money. And this is where I had to understand how money plays a part in my life, because I came to something that I call the quadruped theory. And the way that I put it is, there's 4 aspects of life. If you want to live a happy and fulfilled life, you have to be healthy in these 4 aspects. First, you have to be physically fit. Second, you have to be mentally fit. Third, you have to be spiritually fit. And fourth is financially fit. And the way I put it in this order is because physically, if you're not physically fit, if you're morbidly obese, you're on your deathbed, it doesn't matter if you have $10 million. The only thing you care about is being healthy again. Second, mentally fit. If you are depressed, if you're anxious, if you are not surrounded by people that you love, if you're not happy, having more money is just going to make you more miserable. And this is a big misconception out there where I know people in my own personal life, I'm sure you do too, where people are like, if I just make $1 million, I'm going to find the love of my life. I'm going to be liked. People are going to want to talk to me. You start to imagine this world where money is going to solve the mental aspect of your life, but that's not the case. It's its own aspect. So more money will not make you mentally happy. Then is a spiritual aspect. And this doesn't have to be religious. This is your purpose. For me, it's what is the reason why you're on this earth? What are you waking up for every single day? If you don't have a purpose, you're not going to have a reason to get out of bed no matter how much money you have. After you have the physical fitness, the mental fitness, the spiritual fitness, that's where the financial fitness has the biggest impact and the most power to help you live the most fulfilled life, because now money is just the icing on the cake, man. It allows you to live a more fulfilled and a happy life, because now you can do more of the things that make you happy. You can give more. You can buy more food for homeless people. You can do more things that give you happiness. Maybe it is writing books. Maybe it's traveling. Maybe it is giving. Maybe it is starting businesses. Whatever it is for you, you have the resources and the ability to do that, but that requires you to have that financial education and be willing to now go out of the way to talk about money and learn about money and understand that, hey, money is something that I need to understand. Money is something that I need to be willing to talk about. Money is something that I need to be willing to learn about, because most of us are never taught to think about money, myself included.
Yeah. I mean, I love that thesis, and I would agree with you, because I had similar rhetoric in my language growing up. So when we talked about money, it was, we always had just enough. So I grew up when I had 0 in my bank accounts on plenty days. And that was just, we had just enough. Or we often talked about money as if we went to a place where someone had a nice home or someone had a nice car, the conversation would be, oh, well, that person does some sketchy stuff. Or they must have done something that was stabbing someone in the back or causing someone pain to be in that position. And so you start creating this very negative, toxic view towards money. And like you said, at the same time, you need access to it. Have you ever figured out what it was for your parents that you think created that disparity in their relationship with money? Have you ever probed that? Have you ever understood that?
Well,
because it comes from somewhere, right?
Yeah, I think it's a cultural thing. I think across the Indian culture, my parents are from a state in India called Punjab. Culturally, money is just one of those things, like even in my culture, my religion, like there's this concept called kirat karo, which means earn an honest living. Now, many people have interpreted that, in many different ways of, oh, don't worry about money, don't talk about money. And in the Sikh religion, there's also this big concept of seva, which means selfless service, giving back. And so there's this kind of like real giving aspect, which is great. And I agree with, but many times we overlook the idea of how about the earning aspect? How do we earn? How do we take care of ourselves? Because the way I look at it is, if you want to be able to fill somebody else's cup, you want to feed somebody else, you have to be able to feed yourself first. And this is a lesson that my grandfather taught me. My grandparents are immigrants, or they were refugees before they came and lived with me. They were refugees because the state of Punjab used to be much larger. 1947, the state was severed. And if you were a Sikh and you were on the west side of Punjab, you had to migrate east, otherwise you were going to be killed. And it was a very brutal, very rough, very bad time. And my grandparents were on the west side. And so immediately they had to leave their homes, leave their lands, leave family members, leave their friends behind, and migrate and run east. My grandfather, I heard this story a lot, and he actually just moved back to America. But when he started the migration process, the process moving east, all he had was a sword in his hand and the clothes on his back. Nothing else. Left all the money, left all the land, left everything behind, even left his parents behind, and started running. And during that process, he got attacked by a mob. And he had to defend himself, and he saw his uncle get killed right in front of him. His uncle got a knife, a sword right to his head, cut his head open in half. And that was the last time he saw him. And now he comes over to the new east side of Punjab, the new India. He lost his shoes along the way, doesn't have a home, doesn't have any family, doesn't have any friends. He's here just trying to figure it out himself, and now has to figure out, how do you make life work? And what he tells me from that time is, poorness is the worst disease. And the reason why is because when you're at that level of poverty, that level of poorness, you can't even think about feeding somebody else. You can't think about helping another person, because the only thing on your mind is, how can I feed myself? How can you feed your family? When that's the only thing that you're trying to do, you can't worry about feeding other people. And that's where, for me, it was, I want to become successful so I can give back to my family, to my parents, give back to my community, and be able to do more things. Money at its core is just a tool. It allows you to do more of the things that you want. If you give a good person money, they have a tool to do more good. If you give a bad person more money, they have a tool to do more bad. So money, at the end of the day, is just like gasoline. It amplifies whoever you are, which is why we need more good people with money. So now going back to your question of why, I really think it's just a lot of insecurity. If we feel like we did everything right, we're working hard, but we don't have what somebody else has, something must be wrong. They must have done something bad. They must have done something that, we didn't see. So we create excuses, we create smoke screens. But the thing that we don't understand is the financial education aspect, because that is the thing that can make or break your finances. It does not matter how much money you make, what degree you have, who your parents are, where you went to school. None of that matters. It's what you do with the money you make. And this is one of those things that it can be very hard for you to understand unless you actually see it. I was actually just reading a study last week. It said that 7 out of 10 Americans across the board are living paycheck to paycheck. And then it said that 50% of Americans, or just about 50% of Americans making 6 figures or more, are also living paycheck to paycheck. The majority of Americans across the board, doesn't matter the income, are broke. They have little to no savings. They have little to no investments, regardless of how much money you're making. And the reason is not just because of what salary or job or what degree you have or who your parents are, but because of what financial education you have. And none of us are taught a thing about money, which is the craziest thing.
Yeah, I really appreciate you going in that direction, because I think everyone thinks that when we do have a conversation about money, because of our conditioning, it has to be this obsession or it has to be this goal. And you're like, well, actually, it's just about education.
Yeah.
It's just about, you have to make this thing and you're going to do something with it.
Right.
We better learn how it goes in and goes out and where it goes. And even for me, I'm reflecting on my own experience. I interviewed my mum recently, not on the podcast, and I want to do that. But I interviewed my mum recently at a dinner. We were at a dinner for my sister's birthday. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to interview my mum like a podcast guest.
Yeah.
At dinner. And so I started asking her questions. I was like, Mom, how did you get your first job? And especially I find Indian, South Asian parents, they don't really talk about, I don't know, at least mine don't. They don't talk about the struggles they went through or the hardships or
you never talk about the problems.
You never talk about the problems. And so I was asking my mom. She told me that she was from Yemen. So my mom was born and raised in Yemen. She speaks Arabic. Unfortunately, she did not teach me, but she's of Indian descent and Indian origin. And in Yemen, there was a war going on between the people of Yemen and the Brits, because the Brits were in control at the time. So my mom said she was studying for her exams while there were Yemeni soldiers on her roof.
Wow.
Trying to protect Yemen, and they had to study for their school exams. And
Crazy.
that's what she was going through. And then when she moved to London, she kept her British passport by moving to London at the time because Yemen got its independence. They moved with like £8, which is like $10. And at that time, that's not bad, but that's practically nothing. And of course, they built up from scratch and for themselves did really well. But the idea still comes to, we have no financial education.
Yeah.
If you could start with, and we'll dive into each of these deeper, if you could tell me, what are the 3 habits that keep us in that poor or poverty mindset, as you said?
Sure.
And what are the healthy habits that bring us into the wealthy mindset?
Sure. So the 3, I think, biggest bad habits when it comes to money. First, probably the most obvious, I would say, is people following the 2 S's, where you're spending or saving all of your money. You'll never become wealthy if you do that. Number 2 would be you blindly follow the system without questioning the way the system works. And number 3 is you don't understand how money works. So if we start with number 1, the 2 S's, save and spend. Now, it's interesting. If you look at the financial statements for the majority of people in America or even across the world, the way it looks is you make money, you pay taxes, you spend money, and then you wonder where all your money went.
Literally.
And so the majority of people don't have any plan for their money. And that's why the majority of people have little to no savings, and the majority of Americans have little to no investments. Right now, about half of America has 0 investments. And I'm talking about 0 401k, 0 IRAs, 0 stock market accounts, 0 real estate investments, 0 gold investments, nothing. And then out of the next half of Americans that have an investment, only half of those have an investment outside of their 401k or IRA. So you have a very small percent, about a quarter of America, working America, that has any investments on their own. When you go back to the saving and spending, we're in a spending culture. America has a consumerism culture, and I joke about this, but the way I like to say it is, traditionally, Indian people make $1 to spend 20 cents. American people make $1 to spend $2.
Yeah.
Thanks to the help of credit lines of credit. Yeah. This is just the culture that we're in, where it's very okay and normalized to spend money, even if you can't afford something.
You don't have it.
And what are you doing? Well, you're spending all your money making everybody else around you rich, but you yourself, you might look rich, but you're actually broke. There's a reason why the owner and CEO of Louis Vuitton is the richest person in the world, whereas the majority of people who wear Louis Vuitton are broke. The people who are wearing Louis Vuitton are trying to look rich, and how are you doing that? Well, you're making the owner of Louis Vuitton rich by doing that. And so this is where you got to understand, there's nothing wrong with wearing designer stuff. There's nothing wrong with having nice stuff. There's nothing wrong with wanting nice things, but you have to be able to afford it first. I used to guest teach in Detroit Public Schools. And when I used to teach there, it's a rough school district. I would talk to the kids about life, motivation and entrepreneurship and money and success. And one of the things that I would ask is, how many of you have a job? Almost all of them raised their hand saying that they had a job. My next follow-up question was, how many of you have a bank account? Nobody raised their hand. So I asked, what do you do with your paycheck? They said, well, we get a physical check, then we go to the liquor store, we get it cashed. The liquor store owner takes 1 to 10%. Then you buy pop, candy, a bunch of junk on the way out. And by the time you're out of the store, you've already given away half of your paycheck. I call it a net zero thinking, where we think in terms of spending. If I have $1,000, I can go out and buy this handbag, this nice thing. If I have 10 grand, I can go on this nice vacation. If I have 50 grand, I can go on and buy this nice car. We think in terms of spending because we think, if I have this money, how can I spend it? Now, if you break away from that and now you start creating a buffer and you don't spend all of your money, the next problem is we save our money. Because for me, the only financial education that I was given was save your money. Because if you're not spending it, now you are building up a big bank account. And if you have a big bank account, you'll be wealthy. But the reality is you will never be able to become wealthy through your savings. Your savings will never make you wealthy. And if you don't believe me, I'll give you just a mathematical term. Your savings right now are growing by essentially nothing, but let's just say 1%. And I'm being very, very generous here. If your savings grow by 1% and inflation is higher than 1%. And we can see now inflation is extremely high, but even before the 2020 pandemic, inflation was still higher than 1%. We were 2 or 3%. Inflation means that the value of your savings are dropping. So if inflation is higher than your savings, that means that your savings are losing value each and every day. Every day that you save your money in the bank, you are slowly becoming poorer each and every day, and most of us never see it happen. Now, this doesn't mean you shouldn't save any money. This just means you have to understand how to save your money strategically, because wealthy people do not want to save all their money. They want to save their money for an emergency, they save their money for an investment, or they save their money for a big purchase. If it doesn't fall into one of those three things, you don't want to save your money, because now you're saving money. Your savings are just making you poorer each and every day. This brings me to then the second aspect, which is blindly following and trusting the system. And this one was the most difficult one for me, because growing up, most of us, myself included, are always told that if you want to become successful, go to school, get good grades, get a good job, climb the corporate ladder. For me, it was go to school, get